Let's talk about a couple of tools that I use on pretty much every project that I'm working on. Our scratch awl, these come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. They don't need to be that expensive. You can spend $2 or $60 depending on if you want to buy something cheap that works or you want to get something custom made. The choice is yours. We'll talk about the wing dividers. You've probably all seen a pair of these somewhere. That out of there. And we'll talk about the stitch groover. So let's start with this scratch awl. What can you use this thing for? Quite a bit, actually. So if you need to, say, trace out a pattern on something, very easy to keep control of this tool, make your mark, and then you can trace around it. We don't use pens on our leather, so something like the scratch awl is really kind of the best option for leaving a mark behind. So now you have this very clear mark, very easy to see. This serves kind of a secondary purpose as well. You've created an indentation in the material, so if you were to come back through with the blade to start cutting it out, if you keep your blade angle low and you're not pressing real hard, you maybe take one or two passes or two or three passes to get through, it'll fall into that groove and track along your outline of your template, so it just makes things very consistent. I use this tool a lot to say, all right, I need a rivet right there. I'm gonna have to punch a hole there. So when I go back through and I punch my hole, well, I'm just gonna take that material out, nothing will be left behind. If we need to use it to index a place for reference, say we need from the end of this 1 inch back, we're gonna need to put a rivet right here. We just mark it there. This also works if it's just some other reference point that we need, but we aren't going to be working in the material. So if we put a mark, that would stay there. If you go off the edge like this, now you've got your reference point. You can square it up and put your mark up here or whatever. Now when you go back through and you go to bevel this edge, you're going to take that material off and you'll never know it was there, but you've had your reference point the whole time. Really useful tool. If you're going to do a glue up on something like this pull-up leather that has a waxy finish and that glue's not going to take, you could, if you wanted in a pinch, use this to scuff that area where the glue is now going to adhere to because we've gone through that top layer. Super useful tool. Definitely recommend one of these. Now let's talk about these wing dividers real quick. We'll just get this out of the way. These are a useful tool, especially when I have something that stays set the way that I like it here. This is easy to manipulate. I typically use these for either measuring something out against one thing to another if I want to make holes equidistant from either end of something, or if I'm needing a stitch line that's a little farther from the edge on, say, a bag, I'll use these. All right, let's talk about the stitch groover. This is a really useful tool whether you are hand stitching or you're using a sewing machine like I typically do, because it gives you a good reference point to either line up your pricking irons or to set your needle as you're sewing. To adjust this tool, you would crack this collar and this guide will move in and out to whatever you want it set for. I keep this tool set at 5mm. I don't change it. That is the inset that I like for my stitches on things like wallets or journal covers or something that's a little smaller. Now you have really two different types of inserts or tips for these. You have this one, which I prefer. It just leaves a groove. Again, it's just a reference point for where I'm going to put the holes for the stitches. The other option is essentially a small circle that has a blade edge in it. So when you draw it across your material, it's going to take out a small string of leather, which will leave behind an indentation. Now what that's really good for is if you're using heavy thread and you're doing saddlery work or something like that, where you want either aesthetically just to have your stitches laying flush with the surface of the leather, or from a more practical standpoint, if those threads are raised off of the surface of the leather and you have something that comes by and snags it, you could abrade it or cut through that thread. So it'll let you set it down flush, so whatever comes sliding across it will just clear those threads as well. So to use this tool, a couple of things to keep in mind. When you are using it I would suggest not having it fully horizontal. If you're right-handed, cant it a little bit to the right. If you're left-handed, cant it a little to the left. So basically what we're trying to do is trying to keep this guy down on the side of the leather, because if we don't, there is a chance as we're moving that it'll roll up over the top and we'll cross our project. It's also important that you keep pressure into it for the opposite reason. If you're not pressing into your material as you're making your mark, you can walk away. So when you're using this, just a moderate amount of pressure. We're not going crazy. We just need a reference mark, and you make your mark. I always work my tools toward me in a line. I don't work at 90. I don't work at 45. I work close in line with my body so that when I'm drawing a tool, I'm bringing my elbow past my ribs. It helps you keep control. It gives you a good grounded place to work from, and you're not walking around with your tool. Now, if this mark isn't deep enough or the leather just isn't taking a mark well, you can always push too. And that will make a much deeper impression. It'll be a lot easier to see. So let's talk about going around an edge or a corner. Straight lines are pretty easy. So my theory in general is I don't move my tool, I move my material. So if I'm trying to go around here and keep this radius as I'm going, that's hard to control. But if I kind of plant my tool and I move my material, I'm going to move my hand a little bit, but if I move my material, then I have you can see right there, I moved my hand a little bit too much, it caused this little wonky spot. If you were to just move the material, you have a better shot of getting that nice radius that your stitching can follow easily. A couple of tools, strongly recommend. I use them every day. See you in the next one.